Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. So I was going to do kind of a quick recap of the debate, but after the entire embarrassment of the left media losing their minds, I decided to go elsewhere and spent the entire episode just kind of showing you how bad and how childish mainstream media is. The entire scrum was a joke and a manipulation of whiny little babies. I hope you tuned into my previous episode to see it. Don't let mainstream try and convince you anything otherwise. It was the CBC first, followed up by the rest of the screaming babies that ended up making this whole cancellation possible, which worked out to the favor of the Liberals, especially since they didn't want it to happen in the first place. But today I'm just going to go over a few little clips of the debate that I think are crucial. And the media's talking a little bit about it, but for those of you who didn't actually tune into the whole debate, I just wanted to kind of play out certain parts of it in its entirety so you can really hear and digest how bad Carney is. And I'm actually wondering if Singh is purposely trying to lose NDP's support. He's like a little child, constantly interrupting. Oh, I know the answer. And then just blatantly lying. I'm not going to show you all of those little clips. Like I said, you may see a few here and there just throughout what I'm going to show you today. But it's just, let me know how you feel in the comments. It seems as though he literally is purposely trying to lose NDP support, which then, of course, all of those supporters would just jump on the Liberal bandwagon, because that's pretty much the demographic that those two parties are. They really are the same party. So let's just get started here. There's some pretty comical and intense moments that we're just going to kind of fact check as well. And we'll just discuss it openly here. And yeah, let's just let's just start.
Okay, we now move into open debate, and I'll start it off, Mr. Carney, with you, and then we go from there. Do you still support dollar-for-dollar tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses?
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar-for-dollar tariffs. We have to recognize, and I think we all do, the United States economy is more than 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And the principle in terms of our counter tariffs is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector. Last point, I know you're pressed for time. The Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S., so that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre.
All right. Previous episodes, people, everything you said is a lie. The massive jump in food in the last month is not Trump's fault. It is Carney's. I've proven this on a prior episode. This is what you get when you have mass inflation by overspending, and then you go and throw a 25% tariff on a pile of food. Yes, all of your vegetables, meats, processed, all of that. I showed the entire list and even linked the website, government website, that shows all the food that you're being tariffed on. Second of all, the auto industry. Honda is discussing this, and they may have backed down for now, but this is a serious issue because there are manufacturers that have huge factories on both sides of the border. And the fact that this company subsidizes certain companies while not giving other companies the same equal proportionate type of a donation has really pissed off a lot of auto manufacturers. So again, like literally everything he said was a blatant lie or a twist of the truth. Let's just let this play out in real time.
One in, then Mr. Singh.
Well, Mr. Carney, you claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the U.S. a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
Let Mr. Carney respond, and then Mr. Singh.
Sure.
If I may, yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as Prime Minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as Prime Minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. Got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly...
Once again, that's a lie. Do you want to ask Scott Moe about that? How about Daniel Smith? And even better, what about Yves Blanchette? What about the Quebec? These people haven't. There literally is no agreement. Again, a blatant lie.
The federal government to commit with respect to project reviews.
The question was about pipelines.
I'm getting to it. Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying
That's
on provincial.
under
Yes, it is
C-69.
possible under. It is possible on our system.
No,
it
it's
is
not.
the
It's
impact
banned
assessment.
under C-69.
It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
Mr. Singh's turn, please.
Of course, we agree around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada. We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. People are already losing their jobs. And while, Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires, but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have...
And I got to give Loudmouth credit here. He is right. He's right. The money isn't going where it should be going. The Liberals do not care about citizens. They do not care.
Would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rent, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have not heard from Monsieur Blanchet yet in this segment, so please.
Yeah, Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British...
And that's the truth. He's doing the same thing that Trudeau would do and all of his ministers. They go across and they say one thing in Eastern Canada, another thing in Central Canada, another thing in Quebec, another thing in Alberta, another thing in BC. Absolute lies. And leave it to Blanchette to call him out. Well done.
Colombia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And
now you got to remember too, the number is like 74 to 77% of people in Quebec agree on putting the East-West pipeline in. I think this is what's helping the Liberals kind of take power, because Quebec is a largely Liberal province. The problem is they're going to vote for Liberals who won't put the pipeline in, because it's against Carney and all of the Liberals who are investors in all of these Brookfield assets, which own pipelines all around the world except here in Canada.
And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have the agreement of Quebec? However, I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already paid to United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poilievre.
Absolutely true.
And then a response from Mr. Carney.
Well, Mr. Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build pipelines. Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C-69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this Liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly in the same line as Justin Trudeau and the rest of the Liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
Let's get a response.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as Prime Minister was to cut the carbon tax.
Yeah, he only did it to buy votes, and under mass conservative pressure, and also the Conservatives exposing the lies of what it was. It was a complete scam. And look at the prices of fuel. Look at the prices, how they went down. They could have done this right off the hop. They didn't. They are only doing it to buy votes. And then, like most of Carney's platform, and this is the reason the Conservatives haven't let their platform loose, is every time the Conservatives announce something, Carney goes out and copies it. But you can guarantee they will change it in legislation to be unhelpful and disregard the actual changes or effects it'll have on the citizens. These people are a joke.
That's the first thing. Second thing is made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those companies most affected. There were several points.
The questions about pipelines.
Means nothing so far.
Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions.
Yes, they are considerable, everybody. Every time you go grocery shopping, just remember, that's not Trump. That is Carney's taxes on you. 25% tax on everything that you buy that comes from the States. Everything. It's crazy. The food is just out of control.
I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines, that means carbon capture, storage, that means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month. Cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what?
That's a lie. Ask Daniel Smith. Ask Mo. That's a lie.
But we are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through...
That's another lie. Look at all of the Indigenous communities, especially throughout Alberta and BC. that are fighting to try and get these projects built and are against all of these regulatory processes. Yes, they want a seat at the table. Yes, they deserve a seat at the table. The government, once again, it got their hands in everybody's pockets, and they're trying to stump. They're trying to stop any type of growth in the West. They are not helping the Indigenous people at all. The Liberal Party has had their literally both feet on top of the Indigenous nations for generations. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Absolutely outrageous what he's saying.
Through the one project, one review window that we put in place at that first ministers' meeting, as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the federal responsibility, but not the unique.
Mr. Poilievre, you want to come back on that?
What you're saying, Mr. Carney, with respect, is a total contradiction. The No New Development Law, C-69, guarantees there will not be one-stop shop because it requires the Government of Canada to actually duplicate the same project.
Have no regulation.
Have one-stop shop.
Over any energy.
We just got to let him finish his sentence.
You see what I mean? Like a child. I'm really starting to think he is purposely trying to sink his own party in order to benefit the Liberals. Because there's no excuse for this behavior and stupidity. What he's saying is ridiculous.
Just let him finish his sentence.
Well, that is not true. In fact, Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple levels of referral that it takes now 17 years to get a major project approved in this country. That is why in the last 10 years we've had the worst economic growth in the entire G7. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a change, and the Conservative plan for change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United States.
Mr. Singh, then Mr. Carney.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, it's clear the Liberals bought a pipeline, they built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think.
By the way, that pipeline is heavily invested in by guess who? Brookfield.
What we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future that we need.
Mr. Carney.
3 quick points. First, the pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the east-west grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor. Huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one.
Do you see how they're feeding off each other? But yet Singh is the idiot. This is what I mean. It's just something's not right here.
Thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. If we have one Canadian economy, not 13, and if we just look at that agreement we got with the provinces, look at what Ontario and Nova Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps towards this, this is within our grasp.
Monsieur Blanchet, what should we be prepared to...
Now, we're going to move ahead here. Check this out.
What role should Canada play in the other major international crisis in this world, in the Middle East and the war in Gaza? Pierre Poilievre, would you start us off on that? What role can Canada play?
Well, first of all, we must condemn Hamas and, more importantly, the terror sponsors in Tehran who initiated the attacks, the horrific attacks of October 7th. We need to defeat the terrorists so that all the peoples of the world can live in peace and defend the right of, yes, Palestinians to have their own lives free from the oppression of Hamas dictators and Iranian intervention, while Israel has the ability to live in freedom and peace. But I also want to say we need to get back to the Canadian tradition, which is that when people come to this country, they leave foreign conflicts behind. The rampaging riots targeting Jewish communities is utterly unacceptable, and it points to the growing chaos that we see on our streets after 10 years of incredibly irresponsible liberal policies of weak borders, of dividing people into groups, of saying one thing to one group and the opposite to another, dividing and conquering. We must end that division and unite our people so that everyone feels safe, and that when we come here, we put our foreign conflicts behind and we put Canada first.
People
Singh,
come
please,
from
go ahead.
countries from around the world, and they care deeply about where they come from, and they should be able to do so. That's a part of being in our country, to have that freedom. Your treatment of Palestinians has been frankly disgusting. Your treatment of people who provide care and service for people in Gaza has been disgusting. On top of that, people in Israel and in Palestine deserve to live in peace and security. And Mr. Carney, to date, you've not acknowledged that what's going on in Gaza is now clearly become a genocide. It's important to call things out as they are, and you've not done that.
You see what I mean? This guy he's a full leftardist. There is no genocide. There is no genocide. And it's like he's purposely saying these, like, just complete, utter nonsense, gibberish, and again, lies, in order to lose his own voters. And then listen to Carney's response. He just picks up a whole bunch more NDP voters.
Mr. Carney.
We need to work, to go to your question, we need to work with our international partners, maximum pressure, maximum encouragement for an immediate ceasefire. That's the first thing. Encourage the return of all of the hostages. Resumption of humanitarian aid. My government put in place $100 million of humanitarian aid, which is ready to go. With respect to where this ultimately goes, yes, two-state solution, but it has to be a viable and free Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. I will underscore one other thing. Mr. Poilievre rightly mentioned Iran, the Iranian sponsors in this region. We have to be clear-eyed about the fundamental risks of Iran and do everything with our international partners to check it and turn it.
Mr. Blanchet.
If we are to work together, we will have to be consistent. The Jewish community in Quebec and Canada is harassed by a very little minority of radical Islamists. And we don't do so much. The law in Canada says that somebody may invite people to be violent, to propose genocide against another people, if they can be hidden behind a religious motivation. They are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that. And we say it is a crime to invite people to violence and killing other people. And this is what is being done very often in Canada and Quebec with the approval of the Criminal Code of Canada. And we are saying this has to be changed. We have to change what we do before we want people elsewhere to change what they do.
Now, I love the way that he forced Singh to shake his head in acknowledgement, because he is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So he just mopped the floor with Singh and then made Singh shake his head and agree that everything that Singh had just said was absolute crap. Very well done. He is a great politician. Quebec has got a great leader here. Fabulous. It's just what sucks is that he's the largest divider, and he plays a huge role in stopping true democracy for Canada as a whole, because he's thrown the rest of Canada to the wolves by supporting bills that are just decimated a lot of Canadians, the majority of Canadians, while making sure that in that same bill, none of that was brought upon the Quebec people. This party shouldn't exist. And if it didn't, I'm sure this guy could be a leader, probably of the Liberal Party, and he'd be a great leader. He'd be a great leader. I give him credit. Every debate, even his all of his scrums and pressers since he first took power of the Bloc, he's a fabulous politician. He is.
Minute in this segment, Mr. Poilievre.
This is about crises and leadership. And one crisis we have is in immigration. Because of this Liberal government's commitment to a radical policy called the Century Initiative, which seeks to bring our population up to 100 million people. They have allowed massive overcrowding in our communities. That has caused housing shortages, job shortages,
Don't blame immigration
and
for the fault of your government.
And if I could,
the fact that you did not
I didn't
invest in
interrupt
housing,
you. I did
built
not
6
interrupt you,
homes.
sir. I did
That's
not
wrong.
interrupt you.
Don't blame
I do not
people.
blame.
Your
If I could,
failures.
Let him finish.
I do not blame immigrants. I blame the Liberal government, which brought this policy on. And Mr. Carney wants to continue with the Century Initiative. This is crazy. We have to get back to normal levels of immigration, get rid of the fraud in the temporary immigration system, and ensure that the people who come here can arrive in numbers that we can house, employ, and care for. That's how it always was, and that's how we're going to restore it.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. That is our time for this segment. Those are our 5 themes, but we are not done yet.
I thought that was a fabulous answer, and he's absolutely right. And again, listen to the heckling, just like a child, and with no proof. The whole 6 homes, that's a lie. It was 200,000, and it was an average of 200,000 plus while he was the housing minister. Everything that Singh says, like I said, I swear he's purposely trying to sink his own party because he knows that those voters are swing voters and they are going to go Liberal. Let's move on. I got one more segment I wanted to show. This, I believe, if of all of these debates, was the most crucial turning point. Now, there's a lot of people out there going, Carney just lost the election. I had discussed with a few people. There's been a few polls on how many people watched the actual debate. The people who mostly vote left-leaning only watched the very beginning, and they dwindled off and they didn't care about the rest of it because they don't care. They're just, all they care about is their card holder, their Liberal Party. They all think that if you're not a Canadian unless you are red, unless you are a Liberal. They don't care. Whereas the opposite side, were conservative, watched the entirety of the debate. And it's sad that this came nearing the end of the debate. Again, absolutely priceless. Listen to this. It's fabulous.
And that will be?
Mr. Carney, but if I could begin by setting the stage. The choice in this election is, after a lost Liberal decade of rising cost and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb, do we want to elect them to a 4th term? Or do we want to change? Change so that you can afford food and homes. Change so that you can be safe on your street, and change so that your paycheck grows faster than your cost of living. Change with a new Conservative government. Because Mr. Carney is not change. Mr. Carney, in 2020, it was recorded, you began advising Justin Trudeau. It's still on the Liberal Party website today that you are Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. They might want to update your website on that. On June 3rd of 20...
Now, guess what? Literally, right after this came up, the Liberals jumped on their website. And what did they do? They scrubbed it. This is fascist. This is socialism. Literally, they scrubbed the website because it was on there. Crazy.
21. You said that inflation would be a sign of economic progress. And you advised governments, including Justin Trudeau's, your Liberal government, to print money, which led to the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Now, that means that mothers went to bed with empty fridges and empty bank accounts, worried how they'd feed their kids, that seniors worried they'd be evicted from their homes, that young people believed they'd never be able to own a home in the first place. Now, in retrospect, that you look back on the Liberal decisions that you advised Justin Trudeau to take, will you look at the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
You know, I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Are you denying
I
you
am
were his
here.
economic advisor?
I did not provide any of that advice. I did not provide any of that
It's
advice.
on the Liberal Party
I'm
website.
sorry. Well,
Are you accusing your Liberal Party of lying about your role? Because it says today you can go to the Liberal Party website now, and it says that you were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor.
The way you judge someone, in my view.
The only thing that's changed in the Liberal Party is Carney. Carney is Trudeau 2.0. Period. Take it to the press. That's the truth. And Poilievre does an amazing job of pointing this out. Nothing has changed. Nothing.
Is how they act, what they do when they have responsibility. Twice I was a central bank governor, and in both cases, if I may, in both cases when I was responsible for inflation, inflation was less than 2%. I'll add that when I was here responsible for the Bank of Canada, inflation was less than 2%. Our dollar was at parity. That is the kind of success that I can deliver for this country coming out of this crisis. And what is that?
Now, it was, but he had nothing to do with that. That was Harper and Flaherty. And he's still trying to take credit for it, where he's been called out already. That's an absolute lie. And even Britain has called him out. He tried to purposely destroy Britain for the Brexit movement. He wanted that he wanted to make sure they stayed part of the EU so that they could remain part of this global cabal, this climate czar religion. Purposely destroyed their dollar, spent huge amounts of money. Busted. Previous episodes, people, I urge you to watch them again. And I love the way that Poilievre just calls him right out.
You were the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau that gave us the worst inflation that we have had in a generation, because the policies that you implemented and those of the MPs that are still in your ministry.
To the
fellow Canadians,
crisis which
the last 10 years has been about the Liberals. The next 10 years should be about you.
And that's time. Mr. Carney, the good news is the next question is yours.
Well, I'm going to ask myself a question. Actually, I'm going to ask a question which has been troubling me. And it's troubling me because, we are in a very dangerous and divided world.
Who is it to?
I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Poilievre. Why not? We're in a dangerous and divided world. We talked earlier about the challenges in the Middle East, the threats from Iran, threats from Russia, Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We have the threats from China, which I raised. We have the United
Which I raised. Lies.
States, which is fundamentally changing its security relationships, its commercial relationships. We have all this. And in the context of that, everyone on this stage, Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Singh, myself, we have our top secret security clearance. We have our top secret security clearance. I got mine within 3 weeks. It wasn't hard, but I felt it was important that I had it so I could be in a position to be informed about that dangerous world and take decisions at. And Mr. Poilievre, it is now 950 days, if my numbers are right, since you've had the opportunity to get your top secret security clearance, and you've refused. Why?
Well, first of all, I have got my security clearance when I was a minister. I got top secret clearance at the time, so there's no problem getting that. But when the government made this recent offer, they said that if I got the security clearance briefings, that I would be gagged under the security law, and I could be prosecuted if I spoke freely about matters of foreign interference. Now, given that...
Listen carefully. Carney just set himself up for disaster. This should be all over mainstream, because they're the ones that were helping to try and force the entirety of Canada to believe that for some reason him not getting his security clearance was just the worst ruthless thing and made him like the enemy of Canada. Listen carefully. This is brilliant. I'm glad Carney set himself up for this. He had it coming. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. People need to see this. This, to me, was the nail in the coffin for the Liberal Party. Now, I don't think it's going to make a heap of difference because mainstream won't put it out there and show it in its entirety, and they won't back up the truths of what Poilievre is saying.
Canada has experienced Chinese interference by Beijing, the government of China, in 2 consecutive elections. I needed to do my job to speak freely without fear of prosecution. And that was not something I would be allowed to do. Even Thomas Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, said that when he was the leader of the opposition, he never would have accepted the kind of gag order that your government and Mr. Trudeau's government was attempting to impose on me. And it's good that I'd made that decision because it has allowed me to speak freely about things like the case where one of your candidates, sir, actually said that he wanted to send a political opponent to China under a bounty threatening his life or imprisonment, and you refused to get rid of him. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that you went to China not long ago to get a $250 million loan for your company. But the reality is you refused to stand up for a Canadian who was being threatened by a foreign government, and I was able to speak freely on that matter because I refused the gag order that the Liberal government attempted.
He's wrenching his hands. He's doing the smirk. He's busted. He's busted. Everything Poilievre said is absolutely true. I've showed it on previous episodes. And in fact, I was one of the few media outlets to be the first to start reporting on Paul Chang. It was Sam Cooper that broke that story. The Globe and CTV and these others, they like to take credit for other people's stuff so they can hide it. And again, previous episodes, I exposed this. I expose what the media does. They will bring it up to try and take credit for it, and then they'll just hide it from media and not talk about it anymore. This should still be being talked about. There's major Chinese interference in the Liberal Party. We know this. 11 MPs are still running or sitting MPs right now who have been put in their positions of power by the money and influence of China, let alone what we know about the 9 Liberal MPs, which is a separate case, that were exposed by 2 RCMP ex-CSIS ex-police officers who showed the negligence and how they gave away our own intelligence officers, sacrificed them, made them known to China. You don't do this unless you're working for the Chinese government. And I'm surprised that Poilievre didn't bring this up. But still, this was brilliant.
Let's let him respond.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things. I think people at home have seen a robust debate here, and it's been a robust campaign, and it has not stopped Mr. Blanchet or Mr. Singh at times during his campaign by making challenges with respect to these issues. So one can address it. I will observe, as someone with a top secret security clearance, that China is not the only country that is accused of foreign interference,
And gentlemen, that is time
We'll leave
for
it
the
at
segment. That's our time. Now, closing statements are still a few minutes.
Boom. Absolute boom. Set himself right up. Couldn't weasel his way out of it. I don't think that his writers had anything to do with this. I believe that he got caught in a position from Pierre, the way that Pierre had worded it, and was trying to challenge some way back, and was trying, of course, bring up, oh yeah, right, security clearance, I'll use that one, and set himself up to expose the truth. That's the truth. And there's other outlets that are going, that's the end, that's the end. I would like to say it is the end, and I'd love to say that people who watch this, and it's true, people that saw this definitely had the exposure of reality and the truth. But once again, mainstream won't talk about it. They're going to throw little wee snippets of it and not talk about it in its entirety. That's why I played that entire back and forth. I cannot believe that Carney thought this was a good thing to bring up. Let me know how you feel in the comments, but I do believe that if this gets out and all of Canada has the chance to actually see this, let's hope that independent media kind of gets away, because there's a lot of concentration on just this media scrum thing. I hope that they realize don't get off focus Yes, we need to expose the left, the paid media, for what they've done on that scrum. But let's make this about the election again, showing how corrupt and infiltrated this Liberal Party is. Because Canada needs to see this. They need to see this. I hope you enjoyed that, my highlights of the debate. I urge everybody to watch it in its entirety. I did run it. I got rid of all the propaganda, saved about 42 minutes from what I worked out, but because the way the ending was cut off, Canada got the short end of the stick, thanks to legacy media. And once again, they got their way. They got their way, but hopefully it forces more people to step back out of that bubble, out of that propaganda control, to realize they are the biggest threat to Canada. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you are, make sure you punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. And doing all of the above will help me grow my channel and get the word out so that Canadians can see the truth. Sorry, just the truth. Until next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm Alias Tagai. Stay informed.